I never intended for any of this to happen. But sometimes, life takes a turn you can't control, no matter how hard you try. My name is Caroline. I'm 44, and I've lived a good life, at least on the surface. I'm married, I have a beautiful daughter, Emily, who's just turned 20, and everything seems picture perfect. But there's a secret I've been keeping, a story I'm finally ready to tell. It all started one afternoon when Emily was at school, and her boyfriend, Alex, was waiting for her to get home. He's 27, charming, confident, the kind of young man who could make any woman's heart skip a beat. I remember the first time I saw him, he had this look about him, a confidence that reminded me of the men I used to fall for when I was younger. That day, I had a splitting headache. I'd been dealing with stress, the kind that creeps up on you slowly until it feels like a heavy weight pressing down on your skull. I was sitting on the couch rubbing my temples when Alex walked in. "You okay, Caroline?" he asked, his voice laced with genuine concern. I forced a smile, trying to brush it off. "Oh, it's nothing, just a headache." He hesitated for a moment, then walked over, kneeling beside me. "You know," he said, his hands reaching up to my shoulders. "I used to give my mom massages all the time when she had headaches. It always helped her relax." Before I could protest, his hands were on my neck, his fingers pressing gently but firmly into the tense muscles. The relief was immediate. I let out a small sigh, feeling the tension begin to melt away under his touch. "You have magic hands," I murmured, closing my eyes as his fingers worked their way down my shoulders, kneading the knots with surprising skill. Alex chuckled softly. "Just trying to help," he said, his voice low and soothing. I don't know when it happened, but somewhere between his hands moving lower and the warmth spreading through my body, I realized how close he was. His breath was warm against my neck, and there was an intimacy to the moment that felt different. I should have stopped him, pulled away, but instead I found myself leaning into his touch. "You know," he whispered, his lips brushing against my ear, "I've never met a woman like you before, Caroline." A shiver ran down my spine. I knew it was wrong. Every instinct in me screamed that this was crossing a line, but I couldn't help the way my body responded, the way my heart raced in my chest. "Alex," I whispered, finally opening my eyes and turning to look at him. His face was inches from mine, his eyes filled with a desire that matched the one I'd been trying so hard to ignore. "Emily will be home any minute," I managed to say, but there was no conviction in my voice. "I don't care," he breathed, leaning closer, his lips just a breath away from mine, and in that moment, I realized I didn't care either. I closed the distance between us, pressing my lips to his in a kiss that felt like an explosion, all the tension and desire we'd been holding back pouring out in one sudden, uncontrollable moment. That kiss was the beginning of everything. It was slow and deep, filled with a hunger I hadn't felt in years. When we finally pulled away, we were both breathless, staring at each other as if we couldn't believe what we'd just done. "Caroline," Alex whispered, his hand cupping my cheek. "I've wanted this for so long." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My mind was racing with 1,000 thoughts, but the only thing I could focus on was how badly I wanted him to kiss me again. Before I knew it, we were on the couch, his hands exploring my body with a confidence and familiarity that shocked me. I knew I should stop this, that it was wrong in every possible way, but the thrill of it, the forbidden nature of what we were doing, only made me want him more. We heard the sound of Emily's car pulling into the driveway, and we pulled apart, both of us scrambling to fix our clothes and look presentable. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. Later, Alex mouthed to me, giving me a wink before Emily walked in. I nodded, biting my lip to suppress the smile threatening to break through. I felt alive, more alive than I had in years. Over the next few weeks, Alex and I couldn't keep our hands off each other. We'd steal moments whenever we could, quick kisses in the kitchen while Emily was in the shower, lingering touches when she wasn't looking. It was dangerous, exhilarating, and I was completely addicted. One afternoon, Emily was out with her friends, and Alex came over. We barely made it through the door before we were on each other, his hands tugging at my blouse, his lips trailing down my neck. "You're driving me crazy," he murmured against my skin. I laughed, pulling him closer. "You have no idea what you're doing to me." We ended up in my bedroom, the place where I'd spent so many nights lying next to a husband who barely noticed I existed. But with Alex, it was different. He made me feel desired, needed in a way I hadn't felt in decades. The weeks that followed felt like walking on a tightrope, suspended high above a pit of fire. Every touch, every stolen kiss with Alex felt like a step closer to the edge. We both knew we couldn't keep this up forever, but the thrill of it, the forbidden nature of what we were doing, was too intoxicating to stop. One evening, Emily was supposed to be out with friends, giving Alex and me a rare chance to be alone. We were in the living room, the lights dimmed, and the tension between us was palpable. He pulled me into his arms, his lips lips crashing against mine with a desperate urgency that matched my own. "I've missed you," he breathed, his hands roaming my body. "Me too," I whispered back, letting myself get lost in the moment. It was just us, the world outside disappearing as we sank deeper into each other. But then, the door creaked open. I froze, pulling away from Alex just as Emily stepped into the room. Her eyes darted between us, narrowing as she took in the scene, the way we were standing too close, my hair disheveled, the guilt written all over our faces. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her voice sharp with suspicion. My heart dropped to my stomach. "Emily, it's not what you think." "Oh, really?" She cut me off, her gaze shifting to Alex. "Because it looks like you two were kissing?" Alex stepped back, raising his hands defensively. "Emily, please, let me explain." But it was too late. The look in her eyes was one of pure betrayal, the kind that cuts deeper than any knife. I had never seen her like this, her face flushed with anger, her hands trembling. "How could you?" she screamed, her voice cracking. "How could you do this to me, Mom?" Tears streamed down her face as she turned away, running up the stairs before either of us could say another word. I felt paralyzed, rooted to the spot as the weight of what had just happened settled over me like a shroud. "We have to talk to her," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Alex shook his head, his face pale. "I don't think she'll listen, Caroline. Not now. I couldn't just leave it like this." I rushed up the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest, and found Emily in her room, her back to me as she sobbed into her hands. "Sweetheart, please," I started, stepping into the room. "Let me explain." She spun around, her eyes red and swollen. "Explain? How can you possibly explain this, Mom? You're supposed to be my mother, and you betrayed me with my boyfriend." "I never meant for this to happen," I said, my own tears spilling over. "I love you, Emily. I never wanted to hurt you." "You love me?" She laughed bitterly, wiping her tears away with the back of her hand. "If you loved me, you never would have done this." I took a step closer, but she recoiled, as if my touch would burn her. "Please, Emily. You have to believe me. It was a mistake. It just happened." Her eyes softened for a brief moment, a flicker of the old Emily I knew, but then the anger returned, fiercer than before. "Get out!" she spat. "I never want to see you again." That night, Emily packed a bag and left. I tried calling her, texting her, but she didn't respond. The house felt empty without her, like a shell, hollow and lifeless. I sat in her room, staring at the bare walls, the pictures of us that still hung there. How had it come to this? How had I allowed everything to fall apart so completely? Alex came over the next day, looking just as broken as I felt. He walked into the house, his eyes scanning the empty living room as if he were hoping Emily would appear, that this nightmare would end. "I'm sorry," he said, sitting down beside me. "I didn't want this to happen." "I know," I replied, my voice hollow. "But it did, and now I don't know how to fix it." We sat in silence for what felt like hours, the gravity of our actions pressing down on us. It was the first time I truly felt the weight of what we had done. We hadn't just crossed a line, we had shattered it, and there was no going back. A few weeks later, Emily called me. My heart leapt into my throat when I saw her name on the screen. I answered on the first ring, my voice trembling. "Emily?" There was a long pause before she spoke. "I want to meet," she said, her tone unreadable. "Of course," I replied quickly. "Anywhere, anytime." We met at a small cafe, one we used to go to when she was younger. She looked different, hardened, as if she'd aged years in the few weeks since I'd last seen her. She sat down across from me, folding her hands on the table. "I've thought a lot about what happened," she began, her voice calm, "and I realized something. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed yourself." Her words hit me like a slap. I opened my mouth to respond, but she held up a hand. "I don't need an apology, Mom," she continued. "I've made my peace with it, but I can't have you in my life anymore. Not after this." The finality in her voice was like a dagger to my heart. I reached across the table, but she pulled away, standing up and slinging her bag over her shoulder. "Goodbye, Mom," she said softly, and then she was gone. I sat there long after she left, the noise of the cafe fading into the background. I had lost my daughter, the most important person in my life, and it was all my fault. The affair with Alex had cost me everything. I had nothing left but memories of a love that was never meant to be. It's been a year since that day, and I haven't heard from Emily since. I've tried reaching out, but every attempt has been met with silence. Alex moved away shortly after, unable to face what we had done. I sit alone in this empty house, haunted by the choices I made and the family I destroyed. If I could go back, I would do everything differently. I would push Alex away that first night. I would resist the temptation that led me down this dark path. But life doesn't give us second chances. And now I have to live with the consequences of my actions. This is my story, a tale of forbidden desire and the price we pay for our choices. I don't know if I'll ever find peace, but I needed to tell the truth, to share the pain I've been carrying alone for so long. Maybe in time, Emily will find it in her heart to forgive me, but until then, all I can do is wait and hope.